Just get a copy, please. Hey, good afternoon. Well done. Are you guys running across the campus? I used to do it last year, then I would have my second year class in the Schumann building, and I always had to run down because I have 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4. I had to run down to take his year, so it was like, oh my goodness. So at least now I'm closer, so I'm happy. Right, did you all get a copy of the quarterly bulletin? I have copies here, so fetch a copy for yourself. We are only going to use this, so you might want to get something to mark on it, read it. This is going to also help you for the balance planning section, especially of your portfolio. Right. So just for the live streaming people and for those of you that want to access it in color, or maybe you have your tablet here or your laptop and you want to have a look, you go to the SunLearn page and come settle down. And on the SunLearn page, you can actually go to the beginning. We need the South African Reserve Bank Quarterly Bulletin. It's in various places, but it's among others there. And you go to this document. This is what I will be using. Foreign trade and payments. Just need a copy of that. And this is where we're at. Okay, can we all settle down? You can have a look at the document in front of you. Live streaming people can open it. The quarterly bulletin that I found on the SunLearn page. It's on our SunLearn page, Economics 288. So this is what we're looking at. I have referred to this a couple of times, but this is a source document that you now can use. So I've copied a couple of pages for you so that you can see what the situation is. This is up to the end of the second quarter of 2015. So this is basically up to where you started with the portfolio. Okay, so the portfolio adds on from here. So they tell you the information that was preceding what you're doing, and you continue the trend. Right. So that's what we're looking for. So in the first section, I'm not going to do too much. You'll remember that in the previous session on Tuesday, we talked about the balance of payments. I showed you what the balance of payments interactions were, as to speak. Remember that? We said for a developing economy, what do we have typically? Current account deficit, financial account surplus, the reasons for that. And then the end story is, okay, it seems like the deficit is higher than the surplus, meaning we're losing reserves. Okay, so let's just look at that situation and then why. We want to know, why did it happen? That's in your portfolio. What would you say? They say analyze the balance of payment situation currently. This is it. This is the last data that we have in terms of the balance of payments. Okay, so if you look at the review, it starts off with the foreign trade and payments, international economic developments. That's the first thing you see. So most of that you probably have gathered now from looking at the news. You'll see the similarities here. This is the story for this year, basically. So we have a couple of things standing out. So we have a lowish global economic growth. Global economic growth is not fabulous. And have you seen lately what's been happening? The IMF, the World Bank, everyone is reducing their growth forecasts. So growth is not as good as it should have been, right? So then we look at the main economies is important for South Africa. So you'll see here they mention United States, United Kingdom, Japan, and then obviously Europe is important for South Africa. And then Asia, the rest of Asia, emerging Asia. Who's emerging Asia? China, and to a certain extent, India. Okay, so and then sometimes even Russia is called emerging Asia. That's all that side. So those are large economies. If you look geographically, the size. If you look population-wise, the size. So they have an impact. We have trade with those countries. You remember our 5 top trading partners. Among them, China, India, okay, US, obviously, Europe. Okay, so we have ties with them. That has an impact on our economy. So that's why this is the first thing they introduce. Then it shows me the global growth. First 2 quarters a little up. Lately, it seems like everybody expects this not to really go up, but either sideways, rather sideways. Going sideways means staying the same. Right, you with me there? Advanced economies. Can you now see what we did yesterday? If you read something like this, here it says right-hand scale, here it says left-hand scale. So it means for the advanced economies, their growth rates will be on the right-hand scale. So they are averaging about 3%. The emerging economies is on the right-hand scale as well. That's 2%. And then global growth is on the other side. They just say nothing. There's always, remember, always this one is the primary axis. Remember yesterday? This one is the secondary axis. So that's what that means. Okay, so now you know how to do that as well. So that's how you put things together like this. Because if you've now put this line and you didn't do this, can you see how they now coincide? Although I have, the different ones I can read here. Right, you with me? Okay, so that tells the story. So after 2010, increase from 2008-9, we have a decreasing trend, a little increase, but now again another dip, a slowdown in global growth. Why is that important? Why does the Reserve Bank start with that? Do you have any articles in your portfolio or any items referring to global growth? How do you say why that is important? In your own summary, what are you going to say? Why is global growth important? And what will happen to global growth?
Sets the stage for when you show what's happening in South Africa.
Okay, so we know that will have impact in what will be happening in South Africa, but what impact? Why is growth important? What will it impact on? If the world grows, what will happen to South Africa? Always think anything that happens will impact us through the balance of payments and the exchange rate. Okay, those two go together. So if there's growth, one, in the current account, especially the trade account, we will have higher exports of commodities and the things that we export that those countries need. With me, what does that do? That pushes the trade surplus up or reduces the trade deficit. Do you understand my jargon now? Well, a couple of weeks ago, you would not have known what I was saying. You see. Ah, there, learning place. Well done. Right? If I say that, if you read that, you understand what I'm saying. That's the first thing that happens. The trade deficit will be lower. Okay, putting less demands on the financial account. But what will happen to the financial account if the global economies grow? And we can see that global growth means higher income in the developed countries or the world countries. They have high income. What does it mean? They have surplus funds. They have more funds to use. So they have more money. They have more money. They buy also more financial assets. So in the financial accounts, we'll see that. Then we will get some of that money purchasing our financial assets. So our financial account surplus might increase as well. So that is important for South Africa, what happens to growth, because we are an export-led economy and we're dependent on the rest of the world's savings in order to afford our current account deficit, our imports, i.e. our imports. What do we import? What types of goods? Import mostly? Intermediate goods and? On a piece of paper. Okay. On a piece of paper, write your name and your student number. If we had good Wi-Fi, I would make you do clickers now. Now we have to revert back to paper. So for the people live stream, open a Word document and type the answer to the following question. Right, so on a piece of paper, your name and your student number and the date. The date is important. Don't make a piece of paper too small. Half a page is good. Half a page is fabulous, but smaller than that, then I will lose it. That's fabulous. If you have half a page, use it in landscape. Right. All right. What did I want to know? No, it's not just song we dance not to get what I wanted. That's what did I want? Oh, okay. What do we mainly import? That is important. Remember, that's the crux of the matter. That's why. I want to know, as a developing country, what two product lines, or what are the two main groups of merchandise that South Africa imports? Two things. We mostly, mainly import what goods and what goods? What are our imports? What are we mainly importing? Tuesday we did that. We say South Africa is a typical developing countries. The developing countries are not rich in capital, i.e. they import goods Good. So write the two words for me. Good and good. Goods and goods. Okay, write those two words. Okay, then that's question 1 and 2. Right, 1 and 2. Then thirdly, that causes the current account, not really true, but often, that helps to cause the current account to be in, choose, deficit or surplus. The fact that we have to import these two goods because we are not rich in capital, right? That causes the current account to go into A, deficit, or B, surplus. So you need to choose deficit or surplus. A, deficit, B, surplus. Choose one. No, the fact that we import these things as developing countries, we import those two things, that leads the current account to go into A, deficit, B, surplus. Okay, are you with me? Right, so let's hang there for the moment. I'll add more questions as we go along. Okay, the live stream people, you have that? You answer those three things. Okay, let's see if that's true. Now, I've seen a couple of you did see it on Facebook. On our Facebook page, I've put the one article about the IMF. Here you see the IMF has a global forecast yearly, which they update in July, which they did. And then last week, they've updated it again, new projections, where they showed, I told you about that in class, where they showed that for next year, we will probably have a 1.3%, South Africa will have a 1.3% growth rate, right? Remember, that's the article I said we'll probably use for the exam or for the test 4. I'll put that one in and ask you questions about that, right? Where we talk about growth next week. Right, so that is one thing that is important. Can you see the whole growth issue? Okay, so there's the projections. It's all projections. We don't know exactly, but that's probably what will happen. Okay, so there's that. Then they talk a lot about the US. Can you see what type of articles you've been looking at, what you will discuss? You see all of that there. And then the main thing, the US Federal Reserve's Open Market Committee left its policy rate. What is that policy rate? What do we call that? The rate that they're talking about? The interest rate. They left unchanged in July, and then they again left it unchanged in the previous one. Remember that whole song and dance? And they expect to have it's like a less, I think there's now a less than 50% chance that they will actually increase it in the next one or in December. But in the Financial Times today, there's a nice article about this whole thing and what the governor of the Federal Reserve Bank has said about it. Right, so that's the story. Why is that important? Remember, we discussed it when we looked at the interest rate, at the exchange rates. We said that the interest rates in these countries, like America, sets the rate that we can measure. Let's not measure against that. That sets the developed economies' rate to a certain extent. And the emerging market economies have a higher rate because investing in us would be more risky. So there needs to be compensation. So therefore, our interest rates are typically higher. So the interest rate, remember the interest rate differential? the difference between the interest rate in developing emerging market economies and the world interest rate in developed countries. That's the differential. And as that differential grows, there's an inflow of surplus funds into these economies purchasing their financial assets like stocks and bonds and those things. So if the Fed increases their interest rate, or investors expect their interest rate to increase, that's what's been happening. A lot of expectations happen. Then what will we see? There will be an outflow of finance from the emerging market economies because now the risk premium becomes too large because the returns go lower. Okay, that decreases because of the interest rate differential shrinking. You following that? Okay, that's important because that has implications for the financial charts. So that's what's been happening the whole time. So in your portfolio, you will at least mention that as part of your discussion. Right? You have to say something about the interest rates somewhere, one of the weeks, if not all of the weeks. Right. Okay, so there we have it. Then they give us the real growth in some of the countries. I'm not going to go into that. This is growth, 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 growth. And there you have the emerging market economies and China, specifically important for South Africa. And then they talk about the oil price quite extensively, the Brent crude oil price. Okay, so I want to know question number 4. So on your page, question number 4. On the graph on the screen, I mean, remember you have the same graph. This one is just in color. On that graph, we have the Brent crude oil price from 2009 right to 2015. And you see the drop there. Now they talk about the Brent crude spot price being the green one, and they talk about the futures price. Okay, I want to know, question number 4, how would you define the spot price? What is a spot price? What is a spot price? What would the oil spot price? Try something. En Afrikaans sê die kontantkoers. Die spot price is the kontantkoers. And then question number 5. Question 4 is how would you define a spot price? So what is the Brent crude spot price? What does that spot mean, the green one? What does it actually say? What price of oil is this? And then there's the red dots will be the futures price. What is a future there? So my question 5 is not what is the future. Question 5 is where in the financial account of the balance of payments will I find trade in the futures of the crude oil? Yeah, the futures. Futures is a financial asset. So where in the balance of payments will I find trade in those futures? Ever heard of futures? And there's reasons. Write me something. Okay, 4. Question 4 is what is the spot oil price? And then 5, where in the financial account will I record transactions that are based on the selling, purchasing and selling of oil futures? And I'll help you with the answer once we get there. Right? We're looking there. write something. All right. Okay. You can add to it as we go along. See if you can find, if you listen carefully, I'll give you the answer at some point. All right, you with me? Can you see one of the hints would be, if you look at the dates of the green line, this quarterly bulletin was up to the second quarter and a little beyond, right? So they reported until where they knew what the price was actually really. And then the futures price is also an actual price, okay? And that is not the spot price. Those are the instruments that you would sell. So you sell a future, say you promised to sell so much oil at that time, at that price. So that's the price of selling oil in advance. It's a contract which says Caltex or obviously crude oil would be the oil rigs in Saudi Arabia would sell oil to South Africa on the 31st of December at this price. That's the future, okay? So it's a financial instrument, but it is linked to oil, right? Okay, so I'll show you now when we get there. Okay, so that is important for the world because that's one, a commodity price, and secondly, it means that because many countries import that. For South Africa, is that one of our main imports or exports? Question 6. Is oil one of South Africa's main imports or exports? Just write import or export. Oil is an import or an export. Okay, then what do we use it for? Oil is important because we use it for electricity. We use it for production. We use it for transport. All right? In the US, and especially in Europe, oil is extremely important because they use it for heating. And there it's extremely cold. So heating takes up a lot of oil in those northern hemisphere countries, right? So that's why the oil price is also for them important. All right, then we have the Chinese story. You've kept on seeing stuff about China and China's growth deteriorating, impacting then on us. So that's the backdrop. And now all of that, the conditions in the world, the events happening, the economic variables changing, all of that have an impact on our transactions. Transactions between South African residents and the rest of the world, which we record in the balance of payments. Okay, that's our record of what has been happening. So now what we see here is, all right, what has been happening? And you see that use the two main accounts in the balance of payments that they discuss. We have how many accounts in the balance of payments? You remember from last week. 4. 4 accounts. The first one is the current account. Right, so the current account, the first account, is accounted for here. So now at this point, you should read this and be able to understand all of it. Right? So this is what you're going to report on. Not a long story, because you don't have many words. So you have to condense this in your portfolio and just get to the crux of the matter. What is the situation in the current account? You're not going to explain to you the current account consists of 5 sections and each of them, because then you're going to write 500 words just on that. You just need one small paragraph for the balance of payments. Right, so what do you actually say? They have a lump sum and dance. So they tell us about the trade balance. Is the trade balance important? That's quite important. That has to do with our merchandise imports and exports. Do you remember that? Okay. So they say something about our trade balance. And for the first time in a while, we had a surplus in the second quarter. Do you remember that? On the trade balance, that would mean, question 7, a trade balance means what is greater than what? A trade balance means is greater than Question 6, am I? 7. At 8, 7. 7 is a trade surplus in the balance of payments means what is greater than what? A trade surplus means the positive trade balance, which means a surplus, in the second quarter largely reflected increased global demand alongside the relatively depreciated external value of the rand. Do you understand that? What is a depreciated external value of the rand? That would mean that the exchange rate has depreciated. If the rand depreciates, I'm going to talk trade account. Trade account means merchandise exports plus gold minus merchandise imports. Remember that. If we look that and the South African rand depreciates, what happens to the price of imports and exports for the physical world? I know, it's a lot. When I know it's late, focus. This really helps you for later. I promise you. This is something that happens in your brain, that when you read these things, you understand. This is also some trivial pursuit type knowledge that you just need. Okay, take a deep breath. Seems like
Could you repeat questions?
I will. Everybody take a deep breath. Do that. Then we won't have to slide with voice. Right? All right. So it's question 7. He asked me to say again. Come. South Africa had a surplus on our trade balance. That's the first section of the current account. Okay, so I asked, what is a trade balance? A trade balance would mean what is greater than what in the trade account. Okay. Now I want you to look at that sentence and understand it. The positive trade balance in the second quarter of 2015 largely reflected increased global demand for our what? Higher global demand. Can we talk this when we talked about the growth? When the other countries are growing, there's higher global demand for what? For our what in the trade account? For our exports, right? So that sentence would mean we have higher exports because of higher global demands. And secondly, why did we have higher exports? Not only did the quantity increase, that's the first thing, the quantity of our exports, the volume, the quantity increased, the number of units demanded from abroad, with me there. But also, because the exchange rate depreciated alongside a relatively depreciated external value. So the depreciation does what for the rest of the world? The rand depreciates. People in America and Japan and China need to pay. No. They have to pay less dollars and euros and yen to obtain South African rand. South Africa needs to pay more rand to get dollars, right? So America pays less rand to get, less dollars to get rand. So what does that mean for the price of our exports? The rand price of our exports remain the same, but to buy those things now, they have to pay less dollars and less euro. So the price of our exports relatively go down, right? So if that happens, what happens? The guys might demand more. All right, remember from way back, price goes down, quantity demanded, up, same thing. All right, so that is the reason, that's what that sentence says. You with me? Right, so if you read this ever again somewhere in the news, you'll understand it. All right, so we have export proceeds rose in the second quarter. And here you have the answer. Well, we have a surplus. Export proceeds rose in the second quarter, while the value of merchandise imports edged lower in line with the moderation in domestic demand over the period. Higher exports, lower imports means value of exports greater than the value of imports, leading to a trade surplus. Okay, you get that. So we had a trade surplus, but then we add the rest. Here we have exports and imports. So here we had a positive trade balance. Now you have the answer for question 7, everybody. All right. Then we have negative, you've seen this before, the negative service income and current transfer payments. And that led to a current account deficit, which we always expect in South Africa, but that was smaller than before, but still at 3.1% of GDP. This figure, remember, the 3.1% of GDP, you have to remember this here as being the deficit of the current account. All right. Okay, that's one. You don't have to remember many figures, but this is one of them. Right. Okay, you with me? So that is my balance of payments current account. This you've seen. All right. It's the trade account, this income and transfers account, and the balance then being in deficit, but a smaller deficit. All right. Then they have lots of information, detailed information that you don't really need. Here we looked at this, remember? We got some information from this in the first lab session. So you actually understand all this. This is what happened to our net gold exports. There's an impact of the relaxation of gold imports in India. There we have lines and lines, interesting stuff about tourism. And that's the story of the current account. So is this the typical developing country story? Yes. Right. Now we get to the financial account. What are the other one? The other one is the capital transfer account. It's the second account. They don't even mention it, it's tiny. But then the main other account is the financial accounts. The two main accounts, the current account and the financial account. What has been happening to the financial account? Now, this is the story. In your news, this helps you. Remember, like I showed you in the exchange rate, all those factors that we numbered when we discussed the exchange rate, the same thing here. This, what they say here, gives you an idea of what will be happening to the transactions that causes the exchange rate to appreciate or depreciate. Remember, the exchange rate does not move separately from the transactions that cause it. The demand and supply of the exchange for the currencies that determine the exchange rate. Why is that? The demand and supply of that would be because of the need to purchase goods and services and financial assets. It's specifically financial assets. So if you look there, I want you to read the first two paragraphs and mark what factors do they say impact on the movements in the financial account. Right? Identify the factors. Like we did with the exchange rate. You see it's the same factors. Yeah, I'll quickly give you 2 minutes. In those two paragraphs, mark what things, what events, what factors impact movements on the financial account. Global financial markets continued to be volatile in the second quarter of 2015, affected by various factors and characterized by phases of alternating risk-off and risk-on trading sprees. Remember we talked about that. What is the difference between risk-on and risk-off? Can you remember? When will investors purchase more assets in South Africa, financial assets, like shares, when it's risk on or risk off? Risk on, because it's more risky to purchase emerging market economies, shares, and so on. When it's risk off, they are very wary, and we see if any speculation comes up, anything that changes the sentiment, there's an immediate reaction to sell. That would be risk-off behavior. The smallest thing that happens would be risk-off, right? So the risk-off, risk-on is important in terms of the trading. Among the factors, now have you marked this, influencing sentiment were the continued strengthening of the U.S. economy. So we know when the U.S. economy strengthens, we have an impact, with expectations of an imminent interest rate increase in the second half of 2015. So we have the U.S. economy, one, their growth, secondly, their monetary policy. Interest rate growth would mean that will impact on our financial flows. Then the intensifying Greek debt crisis. So we have debt crisis worldwide, or then specifically in Greece. There they have the slump in the Chinese stock market, as well as the further weakening of commodity prices. Does this sound familiar? Those are all those numbers we did with the exchange rate. So the same things. Why? It's the same situation. Why did the exchange rate appreciate? Because of these things happening in the financial market, changing the transactions. Domestically, relatively sluggish economic growth. So economic growth domestically is one aspect in the first half of 2015, amid ongoing electricity supply disruptions and other structural impediments dampened international investor sentiment towards acquiring domestic financial assets. That whole paragraph explains to me the factors that affect sentiment. And what does sentiment do? Investor sentiment will say whether they will purchase South Africa's and other emerging market economies' financial assets, whether we would actually get the money we want from the rest of the world to invest in us so that we can afford our current account deficit and so that we can grow. Okay, you follow me, sort of. After having reached the capital inflow of 33 billion, the financial counterbalance again, smaller inflow in the second quarter. A significant outflow of capital was evident in the other investment category. What is other investment? Can you remember? Example of that? Other would be loans, trade credit. Well done. Those things are in the other investment category, despite the continuing injection of liquidity in Europe and Japan. Now, the injection of liquidity in Europe and Japan, what is that? You've heard of QE. Have you heard of QE? QE is expansionary monetary policy that these countries implement. You remember from Olivia, expansionary monetary policy. So they increase the liquidity, the money supply in those economies. Right, that's QE. You must know that because if you read the paper, they just write QE and then you can't think of a ship, a big boat. It's not that. QE is quantitative easing. Okay, you would have read that in some of the articles. Okay, that's what it means. So QE in Europe and Japan. However, not this directly and especially portfolio investment registered capital inflows in the second quarter of 2015. Then, in this, the question I ask about the oil futures. Are you with me? The oil futures, those red squares, right? Future prices are prices of those documents, like I said, those contracts. They are recorded in the financial derivatives section of the financial account. A future is one of those derivatives. It's that instrument to get rid of risk in a way. So we all know that the economies need to purchase oil. Now they can't wait for the oil price. The green line oil price, the spot price, is the now price of the day. What is the spot price today? That is that price. It's like the exchange rates we look at is the spot exchange rates. Okay, so those are the green line. But now companies need to know, Eskom needs to know, purchasing coal, for instance, Eskom would use future contracts. So they would purchase a future from the manufacturer saying, okay, I'm buying this future at that date, you will deliver at this price, this commodity. But then, as it gets closer to the time, these future contracts get traded because that price is already determined and now the spot price changes. So it makes that future contract either a better deal or a worse deal, depending on the spot price. And the trade in those futures, among others, futures and options and swaps, those are all derivatives, that's the financial instruments that's traded. That is recorded in the financial derivatives section in the financial account. Okay, so that's where that comes in. And then what did we see? This is the second figure you need to remember. And that brings us to the story to ask. So, analyzing the balance of payments. In spite of a trade surplus in the second quarter of 2015, The current account recorded a deficit of 3.1% to GDP. Okay, that sentence is a nice portfolio sentence. The surplus in the financial account, however, was only 0.4% of GDP. That poses a problem because the surplus in the financial account is not sufficient to finance the deficit in the current account. So if that persists for the rest of the year, we are running into problems in terms of our reserves. Because what you can see if you look here, the reserve assets, you see our reserve assets in the third, fourth, and fourth quarter of 2014 decreased, and we can see that the same trend seems to be going on in the 2015. Our reserve assets, which means, what are the reserve assets? The foreign exchange reserves and gold that we have. Because of all the transactions in the balance of payments, we have seen only a marginal increase in reserve assets. So we are actually, when we have a minus, like last year, we lost, that's that dam. We've lost assets, okay? So that's why that interaction is important. All right. I think you can come see me quickly. So I will see you on Tuesday. We'll wrap this up and start with growth. Bring this page with you again. Have a great weekend. I'll give you all, if you can, as you walk out, can you just give your questions, please, answers to the questions. Thank you. The guys on live streaming, you can email it to me, lnieu, LNIEUW @sun.ac.za. Thank you. No, I'm not going to do that. No, just the financial account. Yeah, the 0.4% is not sufficient to finance it.